I'm Rosie Blau, co-host of The Intelligence.
And I'm Gregg Carlstrom, a Middle East correspondent.
And today we're discussing the ceasefire plan in Gaza. And to listen to the whole episode, click the link in the description below. Greg, we've got something of a plan. Tell me about it.
We have the most serious plan that Donald Trump has put forth since he took office in January.
So this is a big day, a beautiful day, potentially one of the great days ever in civilization.
And that's despite the fact that the press conference where it was announced on Monday afternoon was a meandering and sometimes deeply unserious affair. But it's a real plan to not only end the war in Gaza, but stabilize and rebuild and try to move on from the war. The problem now, or the challenge now, is convincing Hamas to accept, working out many of the details which are still left quite vague, and then how to actually implement this proposal.
Before we get to Hamas, just tell me what's in this plan.
The proposal has 20 points, and I think you can divide them into things that are meant to happen almost immediately, and then things that are much longer term. What would happen in the first few days after this was agreed is that the war would stop, the lines of conflict would freeze. Hamas would release all of the 48 Israeli hostages, both living and dead, who it is still holding in Gaza, and there would be a surge of aid going into the territory, similar to what we saw back in January during the last ceasefire, when there were hundreds of trucks a day coming in with food and medicine and other supplies. Again, all of that happens in the first few days, and all of that is plausible. You can imagine that taking place. Where it starts to get fuzzy is what happens after that. There's talk of disarming Hamas, for example. The group is meant to lay down its weapons. Members of Hamas that agree to do so and to live peacefully would be given amnesty by Israel. There would be some sort of international peacekeeping force that would come in to oversee that process and to provide security in Gaza. And then there's something called the Board of Peace that would be established to oversee and govern the territory after the war.
It's so important that I'm willing to do it, and we'll do it right. The leaders of the Arab world and Israel and everybody involved asked me to do this, so it would be headed by a gentleman known as President Donald J. Trump of the United States.
Where this gets fuzzy, the Palestinian Authority, which governs parts of the occupied West Bank, is also meant to have some say in post-war governance in Gaza. Trump has been clear he wants that to happen. America's European and Arab allies want to see that as well. But at the press conference at the White House on Monday, Binyamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, was very clear that he doesn't want that to happen, and he doesn't think it will, at least not in the foreseeable future.
And just for context, how close is this plan to previous ones that have been on the table?
It's very similar not only to what has been negotiated over the past few months by various Arab and Western countries, but by what they've been discussing almost since the beginning of the war. I mean, that's what struck me reporting on this the past few days, is how many of the elements of this plan have been discussed by America and Arab states and other countries as far back as late 2023, when they first started discussing what the day after the war would look like in Gaza. And of course, Israel refused to take part, by and large, in those negotiations. But so much of this is not new, and it drives home, I think, how many missed opportunities there have been over the past 2 years to try and end the war. If you go back to February, the first meeting that Trump had with Netanyahu at the White House, when Trump surprised everyone with this outrageous plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza and turn it into a beach resort. We've moved a long way from that. Obviously, none of that appears in this proposal. If Trump hadn't done that, if he had presented something like this 6 months ago, we'd be in a very different place now. I think similarly, you compare this to what Joe Biden presented in May of last year, almost 18 months ago now. There are a lot of similarities between this plan and the Biden plan. The problem back then was that Biden wasn't willing to put pressure on the Israeli government to accept the plan. He allowed Netanyahu to stonewall him and to refuse any serious ceasefire negotiations. Trump, I think, finally has realized he needs to put pressure on the Israeli government. He did that at the White House yesterday. He went so far as to get the Prime Minister of Qatar on the phone so that Netanyahu could apologize to the Qataris for that Israeli airstrike in Doha a few weeks ago. So Trump finally bringing pressure to bear on the Israeli government. And I keep thinking, if someone had done that earlier, either Trump or Biden, this war could have ended months and many thousands of dead Palestinians earlier.
So Netanyahu has been brought to the table, albeit begrudgingly. What about Hamas?
They have not agreed to this deal yet. The statements that they put out after the White House press conference on Monday said that they haven't even seen the proposal yet, that they were learning about it, at the same time all of us were. When I've been speaking to negotiators over the past few days, their expectation is that Hamas will take several days to study it. They will probably then have amendments or have changes that they want to make. There will be a period of further negotiations. I think there are going to be some things in this deal that are very difficult for them to swallow. On the question of the hostages, for example, the fact that they are all supposed to be freed in the first 3 days of the agreement, Hamas is worried that if it releases all of the hostages, it will no longer have any leverage over Israel, and there will be nothing stopping Israel from breaking the deal and restarting the war. Now, Trump at the White House essentially tried to frame that as a false choice. He was very clear that if Hamas rejected this deal, the alternative was something much worse. And Netanyahu reiterated that point. That's one issue that I think will be difficult. Another question on disarmament. I think it's very hard to imagine Hamas seriously agreeing to lay down its weapons.
But if Hamas rejects your plan, Mr. President, or if they supposedly accept it and then do everything to counter it, then Israel will finish the job by itself.
Thinking about the long term, Greg, where does this leave prospects for peace? We've got a plan. How likely is it to work?
What struck me yesterday, watching the press conference, was the sharply different messages from the two leaders. If you listen to Trump, you think this is a done deal. He said, we're about to end a conflict that has been raging for 3,000 years, which was an interesting reading of history, as if the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been going on since the days of the biblical King David. He said this was one of the greatest days in the history of civilization, basically telling the Nobel Committee, start polishing my Peace Prize because I've achieved peace in the Middle East. If you listen then to Netanyahu when he spoke afterwards, it was a much different message. He said he accepted the deal, he endorsed the proposal, but he was very clear that he wanted to leave himself some wiggle room. It's not just for Trump to apply pressure to Hamas through a mix of threats and inducements to convince them to accept the deal. It's also about keeping pressure on the Israeli government. Trump sees this as a first step towards some kind of bigger regional peace where you can then get back to expanding the Abraham Accords and striking perhaps a peace deal between Israel and Syria, maybe a deal between Israel and Lebanon. He is seeing this as part of a much bigger regional agenda that could also include serious talks about ending the occupation and trying to create a Palestinian state. Netanyahu isn't interested in a lot of that, certainly when it comes to Palestinian statehood. He's not. And so the challenge for Trump is going to be, how do you, after this one day at the White House where you did it, how do you keep the pressure on Israel in the weeks and months going forward?
Greg, thank you very much for talking to me.